Thanks again for joining me. This time I'm going to talk about meshing. So I'm assuming that most of you are here not to learn how to mesh lines on a truss, but to mesh something in 3D, which is by far much harder than meshing along lines. So I'm going to start with that first, and at the end I'll go back to review meshing on lines. So I'm going to use the same shape from the CAD geometry, or the CAD video, and I'm going to mesh this solid element, or this solid here. So I'll start with the more accurate but more difficult way to mesh, and then I'll move towards the easier but less accurate way to meshing. So the most accurate way to mesh a solid like this is called sweeping a mesh. So basically what we're doing is we're gonna define a size control on two symmetric faces or symmetric areas, or I guess similar areas, and then sweep that mesh through the rest of the volume to create our 3D grid. So basically we're going to create a 2D mesh by specifying size controls on two similar areas and sweep through the rest of the volume. So I've got a volume here, and I believe I have the element type as solid 185. That's a generic one for creating a solid model like this. So what I'm going to do in the meshing menu is first go to size controls and open up manual size, and I'm going to specify on areas. So I'm going to pick these two faces with the hole cut into them because they're identical and they can be swept kind of the same way that this shape was made. They're going to be swept along this axis in the center. So I'm going to pick two areas to specify a size on, and I'm going to hold down my left mouse click and drag around to find the right area. So let's start with it. There we go, there's that front face. Now I can let go of my left mouse click, control right click to rotate. I'm going to try and also select this guy on the left. So there we go. Let go of my mouse, and I've selected it. So on these two areas, I'll hit OK, and I'm going to say my edge length is 1/2 inch here. So if you remember, this model was 5 by 10 in width and height, so 1/2 inch is decent enough mesh. So now I've got size controls on this area and this area. So now what I'm going to do in my mesh command, so meshing, mesh, I'm going to do what's called a volume sweep. So you can do a mapped volume, and you can just click on it once you've specified some size controls, and it'll do its best to make all of your elements cubed or in a cube. But if you want a pretty organized mesh, you can do this sweep that I'm about to talk about. So we're going to just select some options here, and we're going to say don't auto select source and target. So source and target is basically the two areas that you specified these size controls on earlier. So you could say that one of these rectangular faces with the hole cut in it is the source, the other is the target. It'll take that grid from the source area and sweep it through over to the target area. So we're going to say number of divisions in that direction that we're sweeping in. I'm just going to say 20. So you'll see what that means here in a bit. So now we click the sweep command, and we're going to basically pick the volume to sweep and hit OK. And the next menu is going to be for selecting the source and the target volumes. You select the source, hit OK, and then you select the target area, and you hit OK. So this is a warning saying that not all of our elements are square, which is obvious based off of this pattern going on here and also around the circle, but 300 out of 3,000 is actually not that bad, to be honest. But you can see that it's taken this grid, it's done 1/2 inch along this direction. So basically what it did on this area is it tried to make all these cubes 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, all these squares. Same thing on the other face. Now it took that grid, mostly grid, a little bit of spider web, and it swept it through this volume along this arc over to this face. So you can see, when I said 20 divisions, I've got 20 divisions along this arc. So that's a pretty well swept volume here. You can kind of obviously play with this so that you can get more elements near stress concentrations or where you're applying forces. That's always better. But that's basically the best way to sweep a volume or to mesh a volume is to use that sweep, because it does a pretty nice mesh with not a lot of spider webbing going on. So give me a second. I'm going to undo this in the code here. I'm going to undo that meshing and show you the messier but easier way to mesh. So again, I had to refresh my code there because I had an old session editor up. So I'm going to go back up here and remove this volume sweep and some rotations from earlier. I'm going to hit Control A to select my code, Control C to copy it all, Control V to paste it in, and hit Enter. So the messier way to do this is to go into size controls. You can pick size controls on an area, and then you can go back to mesh volume and just tell it to do a mapped or a free mesh. 4 to 6 sided is usually what we do. It's saying either square or tetrahedral. The next step down is a free mesh. You just set a size control. Let's see, so I'll go to size control manual on areas, and I'll do all areas. Let's say half again. And I go to mesh, and I do, let's see, a free mesh. And it's going to tell me that it's going to be better in brick shape. That would be a result from the sweep, but I'm going to say I don't care. I'm being lazy. I'll select this volume and I'll hit OK. And there I have this free mesh. So notice they're all tetrahedrals or triangles, which isn't the best. But if you want a quick solution, that's a good way to go. They're all evenly sized. There's a relatively quick and easy way to mesh, so that's doable. Even quicker and dirtier than that is to use this mesh tool here. So click on this mesh tool, and then you can basically click the smart size button and say, I want them to be pretty fine or pretty coarse elements. Just kind of a slider here. And you can set size controls here for your areas. And then you just, say mesh all my volumes, and I want them to try to be hexagonal, which is better. Mapped or sweep. This is another way also to do the sweep command, is to use this sweep over here. But if it doesn't work, it'll tell you, then you have to go back to, tetrahedral and free to make it if it doesn't work. So anyway, you click the mesh button, and it does the same thing. It does the quick and dirty mesh. So that's basically it for volumes. And so if you wanted that, you're done. I'm just going to go back right now and give a really quick review of meshing lines for beam elements or truss elements. So give me a second to clear here. All right, then I'm going to create some key points really quick. All right, I'm going to create some lines. All right, so now let's say I wanted to make this into a truss. Obviously, this isn't a truss shape, but in that case, when you're meshing your lines, you go to size controls, manual, lines, and all lines, and you want to do one number of division. Just remember that for link elements, building a truss, one division, per line. It's going to look like this. That's what you want for the link element. So I'm going to clear that really quick. So if you're doing a beam element, like I say, I want to turn this line into a square cross section and this line into a circular cross section to do a kind of a compound beam. What I'm going to do for that is specify definitely more than one division. So let's see, manual size lines, all lines. So just a reminder, our number of divisions is saying how many times you want to divide this line. So you can say 20, and then it'll be the length divided by 20. That'll be the size of each element in this x direction. Or I can say I want each element in the direction of this line to be half an inch. So I hit OK, and now I've got half-inch divisions along each line. So that's as simple as it gets for meshing lines. Just a reminder again, when you do sections, you're going to specify divisions in the y and z direction, and that combined with this x direction will create the grid that is your finite element mesh when you go to mesh. So that's it for meshing lines and areas. Thanks much for joining me again.